going good. Yeah, it's going good. It's still going. It's still going. Yeah, no, you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed. So let's talk after. Yeah, there's Rick. You see Rick?
Sitting here?
Well, I was going to say there's a table back there where people enter.
Okay.
Because these folks are going to be eating on these tables.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Test 1, 2. All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second Science Cafe of the Fall 2019 series, all about ocean science. For those of you who haven't been here before, my name is Shepard Reed, and I'm with the Flandreau Science Center and Planetarium. If you haven't been to visit us, please come check out our exhibits. Related to ocean science, we have a new sharks exhibit called Sharks, Magnificent and Misunderstood. It's been extremely popular, especially with the younger generations. So bring your kids, bring your grandkids, come see our sharks exhibit, and we have paired with that is a planetarium show called Great White Shark. And that is a full dome show, so you feel like you're actually in the water with the divers and the sharks. It's pretty exciting. So we hope you'll come visit us at Flandreau. As many of you probably know, Flandreau is just one of several science-related outreach sites in and around Tucson that are connected to the University of Arizona. If you're curious, we've got a whole bunch of information up here. Explore more science. We've got a great map brochure that shows you all the different science-related things you can do around town. And with that, I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker this evening. Peggy Turk-Boyer is the Director Emeritus and founder of CEDO. That is the Intercultural Center for the Study of Deserts and Oceans, located both here and in Puerto Penasco in Mexico, working to save the ecosystems in and around the Sea of Cortez, also known as the Gulf of California. So please give a big round of applause for Peggy Turk-Boyer.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you. Well, I'm so happy that you're here with us tonight because we're beginning our celebration of CEDO's 40th anniversary. Shepard said that we're the Intercultural Center for the Study of Deserts and Oceans, but we're better known as CEDO. How many of you have ever been to CEDO? Those of you here. Oh, good. About half of you. How many of you have ever been to Puerto Penasco? Rocky Point? Get a few more people. Well, CEDO has been in Rocky Point, in Puerto Penasco for 40 years now, creating stewards for the future of the Sea of Cortez. In 1980, we opened the doors of CEDO, carrying forward a tradition of a couple of decades of research and education that the University of Arizona carried out in the area, opening it up, opening the doors on the in Puerto Penasco as a basic science field station. One of the first mandates that we had was to create a field station, but also make it a community center. So we took a little bit of a different direction from what the University of Arizona had been doing prior to that. Our mission, one of the first things we did was to find local like-minded people and created a board of directors of the local community and a board of directors in the board of directors in the U.S., creating a binational organization. This group took the charge of governing the organization. The mission, which we still have today, is to foster vibrant communities and resilient ecosystems in the northern Gulf of California, looking for solutions, connecting people, knowledge, and solutions. So the Gulf of California was our mandate. In those days, in the 1980s, we used to call it one of the last great frontiers on the planet. Pristine environments. To give you a little bit of context, in the 70s, just in the 70s, we were beginning to have an environmental conscience in the U.S. That's when we formed the Environmental Protection Agency and the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act. So in Mexico, this area, isolated from central Mexico and on the other side of the U.S. border, was pretty pristine, relatively untouched. The Gulf of California is a 900-meter-long trough. In the north, you can tell by the light color, it's quite shallow. The Colorado River has been dumping sediments into this trough for millions of years. Very rich, lots of shorelines, almost 250 islands, where there's a lot of upwelling and nutrients coming to the surface that nourish the entire food chain. Scientists divide the Gulf into three bioregions: the Central Gulf, the Southern Gulf, the Northern Gulf, and CEDO does most of our work is done in the Northern Gulf of California. So this talk will give you some perspective on the entire Gulf of California, but focus mainly on the area where CEDO's been doing our work for the last 40 years. So the diversity of habitats in the Northern Gulf of California is tremendous. This provides the foundation for a tremendous diversity of life. There are vast areas of coastal wetlands, 450 square miles of coastal wetlands, including the Colorado River Delta, rich intertidal zones. The northernmost mangrove estuary in the Gulf of California is found at Puerto Lobos, and offshore islands. These very varied habitats provide lots of different places for organisms to live and thrive. And they do. The Gulf of California is home to about a third of all the whale species in the world, and 23 of these whales and dolphins are found in the northern part of the Gulf of California. The world's largest whale, the giant blue whale, as well as the fin whale, the humpback whale, 23 species of baleen and toothed whales. And some of the icons for the northern Gulf of California is the fin whale, the second to the largest of the baleen whales. The skeleton that you may have enjoyed at CEDO is a fin whale that washed up on shore in 1984 that a group from the University of Arizona helped us bring to CEDO and mount for display. The other icon that you may have heard of is the vaquita, the world's most endangered marine cetacean and the smallest, found only in the northern Gulf of California. And it's a sad story. There are probably only about 11 animals left. It's always been a pretty small population, and CEDO's history is very entwined in efforts to find a compatible way for fishermen to live, coexist with the vaquita. Right now we're talking about celebrating the biodiversity. It's rich in whales. California's sea lion, the San Jorge Island right offshore of Puerto Penasco is the second largest rookery in the Gulf of California, with from 3,000 to 6,000 sea lions. These sea lions are top predators. Their population varies depending upon the abundance of food, anchovies, sardines, which vary based on climate. Birds, an abundance of birds, pelicans, shorebirds, marsh birds, waterfowl, hundreds of thousands, over 100 species and hundreds of thousands of birds. Again, use the wetlands from the Colorado River Delta along the coast of Sonora as stopover and feeding places, and also as nesting sites in some cases. San Jorge Island is an important nesting site for a number of seabirds. Invertebrates. This is what attracted me to the Gulf of California. Studying these little organisms that live under the rocks in the intertidal zone at Puerto Penasco. The Gulf is rich in macroinvertebrates, 5,000 or so species. Half of them are found in the northern Gulf. In the intertidal zone, we've learned a lot about ecosystems from these animals. The food web of the sunstar is a top predator, and the concept of Keystone Predators was developed by a researcher that was studying this food web in the intertidal zone at Puerto Penasco. This concept tells us that if you have a key predator in the environment that's eating a lot of different things, they are good for helping maintain the diversity because they keep the population numbers down of all of them, or keep them even. So you want to keep key predators in the environment. I just mentioned that the California sea lion is a key predator. So these intertidal zones are rich laboratories for studying organisms. You can actually walk out and count them. Plants, of course, are really important. Their primary productivity, they add carbon and organic material to the food chain. You've got phytoplankton, algae in the intertidal zones, and halophytes, salt-tolerant plants on shore. And Puerto Penasco is a really important place for cultivating halophytes using salt water. Sea turtles, the Gulf of California has 5 of the 7 sea turtles that are found in the world. Most of them feed, all of these feed in the northern Gulf of California, and the olive ridley has been nests on the shores of Puerto Penasco regularly, and more regularly in recent years. So it's really important for all these various forms of life. And in the 1990s, Jacques Cousteau named it the aquarium of the world for this very reason. The abundant fishes are found throughout the Gulf of California. In the northern Gulf, over 700 species in the Gulf. The northern Gulf is especially important for the cartilaginous, the sharks, and the rays. It's got a lot of sandy, muddy habitat. That habitat is ideal for sharks and rays. It's an important spawning ground. Great white sharks are found in the northern Gulf of California. Wrong direction. And these fisheries have sustained the livelihood of local communities. The northern Gulf is known for its productive fisheries. Mexico, almost 250,000 people live off of fisheries, depend upon fisheries. In the Northern Gulf, there's 17 fishing communities that participate in small-scale fishing, industrial with big boats, or recreational fishing. Fishing is the mainstay of the economy of most of the communities in the Northern Gulf, with tourism coming in second. And it is these economic activities and the people that come with them that are mounting as more and more people move into the region. These communities have grown, and tourism has grown. Tourists visit the area, and the threats are mounting. So the Sea of Cortez is no longer probably the last frontier on the planet. Unsustainable fishing activities, a primary activity. There's a lot of illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, open access. Fishermen can fish wherever they want, take whatever they want. Management is lacking. Information for management is lacking. Habitats have been destroyed with the damming of rivers upstream, both the Colorado River in the U.S. and in Mexico along the Sonora coast. Construction on beaches and in estuaries, the construction of marinas destroys important wetland habitat, which is important as nursery ground for many species. And today we're learning how ocean pollution is a huge problem all over the globe. These problems are not unique to the Gulf of California, but they're newer to the Gulf of California. Plastics, gear that's left by fishing activities, keeps on killing animals. These are completely detrimental to wildlife. It's estimated that a third of the bird species in the world ingest plastics at some point during their lifetime, and it's toxic and will kill them. So all of these are human related, and then the big one, climate change. The CO2, increased CO2 emissions is impacting the oceans all over the world, but in the Gulf of California, sea levels are rising, ocean is becoming more acid, temperature is rising, changing the currents and the distribution of larvae and the ranges of species. So the whole ecosystem is changing as a result of climate change. And these fishing communities that are not very diverse in their economic capacity are vulnerable to these changes. So, in the face of these daunting challenges that are growing every day, CEDO started developing a focus that we wanted all the residents and all the visitors to the Puerto Penasco and the Northern Gulf region we felt like everybody should have a deep appreciation and understanding of the resources and ecosystems on which we all depend, and that we wanted people to participate actively in minimizing their impacts and maximizing good practices that would benefit the health of these ecosystems. So with that kind of underlying focus, we developed some strategies and built this model for building environmental stewardship. On the one hand, we focus on community development. It's the people that are causing these threats. People need economic sustenance, and so we put some focus on looking for economic solutions that are sustainable. Education, building capacity, training, involving people in research and monitoring and other activities. And then the bigger pictures, ecosystem management and fisheries management. We'll talk a little bit more about each of those. Environmental education. We base this education in the field because no one is better at teaching us about the environment than the environment itself. We build capacity with many, many different groups, taking advantage of the natural resources that we have in front of us at CEDO, the vast intertidal zone, which exposes with tides daily a myriad of really interesting and beautiful intertidal creatures, all with different ways of living. for 40 years, classes and students from the University of Arizona, from schools here in Tucson, from grade school to high school throughout Mexico, have visited CEDO and used it as a base of operations, a field station, to go out and explore the different habitats in the region and learn about the Sea of Cortez. We also brought our programs to tourists for 40 years. When we opened our doors, we started giving tours, and with the idea that we wanted everybody that came to Puerto Penasco to have an understanding of where they were, the natural environment. And we estimate, all total, hundreds of thousands of people have been through CEDO over the last 40 years. We put together exhibits with very modest funds. The fin whale that I mentioned earlier is an icon for us and for Puerto Penasco. And we brought programs to the local schools. We had 5 years of very concerted education effort with local schools where we brought all the 5th graders out to the estuary and then brought them back to CEDO and had a number of different activities with them. Experiences that they'll never forget. The teachers, we have had years of programs with teachers at different times. A period of 3 years we focused on the teachers of the Upper Gulf Biosphere Reserve to teach them about those ecosystems. And then fishermen are the direct stakeholders that are exploiting directly the fisheries resources. We've done a number of different programs with fishermen in 2 contexts: in the Upper Gulf Reserve as part of an environmental impact study that they were required to do. We had hundreds of, probably 100 workshops with fishermen. Approximately 2,000 fishermen participated. And then in the context on the Sonora side, another 100 or so workshops working with fishermen. So, and during these workshops and in this education, we try to share with locals what we know about the natural resources, and especially in the case of fishermen, we try to understand what they know about capture their traditional knowledge. So we start with capacity building, but our goal is to engage them and to participate in activities that can reduce impacts. And often that involves them identifying what the impacts are and which ones they're willing and interested in doing something about, and helping them figure out how to work together. Here, fishermen are all voting on which activities they want to do to mitigate the impacts of fishing as part of their requirements in the Upper Gulf Reserve to reduce the impact on the vaquita. We've done environmental contests for 22 years with the youth. Started in Puerto Penasco, but now we are in 9 different communities doing these environmental contests that pick a theme every year, depending upon what is in the minds of the local community and what CEDO's programs are that year, dealing with water conservation, cleanup, wetland conservation, migratory birds, and in these contests we give training and workshops to students, but we also provide guidelines for them to investigate problems and identify a solution that they want to forward. And so they present a project to us that they want to forward, and then the winners of the contest participate with us to implement their program. These were the winners of the contest a couple of years ago that had come up with a way to degas deep water fish that are coming up from the ocean bottom because their swim bladder fills up with air and then they die. And if they can degas them, they can be thrown back. So it can be a catch and release program. So very practical ideas, and students, we give the winners get to participate, go on field trips, and then we help them with their projects. So I don't know, Alan, do you have the number? Alan Berman is here with CEDO. He's the coordinator of communications and development, and he might know, I can't remember now how many years we've been doing this international coastal cleanup, but We've engaged communities with the Ocean Conservancy to pick up trash in 9 communities. And we're doing that again this year. And fishermen are getting involved in it. The fishermen's gear is, ghost gear, keeps killing animals, even though they're not using it actively for fishing, and so it's kind of a waste. And fishermen understand that, and they're getting engaged in helping us pull some of that ghost gear out of the water. So we've got U.S. Residents in Las Conchas, the community that's our neighbor in Puerto Penasco, to build nests for the osprey because they're lacking high places to have nesting, to nest and reproduce. And now there's ospreys all over the place in Puerto Penasco. And we've worked with fisher leaders and taught them how to use a barcode for following fishermen that are doing impact study. Fishermen got involved in communications, doing radio addresses, promoting with the community some of the steps that they are taking. So people are getting engaged in lots of different ways to promote environmental stewardship. We've developed lots of communication materials. I'm sorry, I'm kind of in your way. Developed lots of communication materials, both in Spanish and in English. Tide calendars, books that outline what fish, the fisheries, the first assessment of all the fisheries, a bilingual natural history newsletter, years and years of publications because, again, we're very interested in everyone being informed about the area that they're living in and enjoying. We also get fishermen and students involved in doing research. I mentioned the contests. Students go out and do investigation. They interview people. They learn about what the problems are, not from us, but from their community. So we get fishermen also involved in doing research. We had a group of commercial divers doing research on their subtidal reefs where they were harvesting black murex snail and rock scallop, and they actually set up voluntary refuges where they promised not to fish for several years and monitor them. And after 3 years, they saw that the resources were rebounding, and so they were very supportive of fisheries refuges as a fishing technique. So fishermen have been involved in monitoring on the beach, keeping track of what they're catching, because you can't really design good management if you don't have this kind of information. They've also been involved in monitoring bycatch, so we can know zones and species that are being caught. Bycatch is catch that comes up in nets that's not being used for anything for the most part. So CEDO's we've done our own research, but where possible, we try to get the community involved in doing research with us because it has multiple benefits. It increases our capacity to generate information. It also gets their buy-in and tracking what's going on with their resources. In climate change, we've done a fair number of projects to assess some of the problems with climate change in the wetlands. We wrote a paper to look at all the potential impacts that climate change might have on wetland systems and looked at the vulnerability of fishing communities to climate change. We held a number of workshops with communities. This is a group of people from wetlands that are very susceptible to climate change, trying to figure out how they were going to address the problems. This is a group of students. In 2018, we produced a tide calendar that outlines all the impacts that climate change might have on the marine ecosystem. At CEDO, we have through the generous donation of a person here in Tucson, we were able to build a pond to house the long-finned dace which is imminently threatened with extinction with the evaporation of the Sonoita River, and now even more so that we're building the border wall, and that's going to extract water from that river system. And the only population of this subspecies of fish is at CEDO now. So we're the caretakers of this species' livelihood. So those are some of the little things that we're doing. We also recognize that complex problems, and there are many complex problems in this region, require integrated solutions. So we try to bring people together to work on some of these solutions for ecosystem and fisheries management. And there are two ecosystems that we're focused on the western side of the northern Gulf. Mostly that's in the context of the Upper Gulf Biosphere Reserve. And the two main concerns for management are the vaquita porpoise, which is imminently in danger of extinction, and the totoaba, which is also an endangered and endemic species, but it's highly trafficked for Chinese markets and brings a good price for the swim bladder, and so it's driving it's driving illegal fishing and the extinction of this porpoise. That area is very heavily managed and very complex. There are about 2,000 fishermen in that region, and we've worked trying to help the fishermen design and implement an environmental impact study. But more recently, in the recent years, we've been working on this side of the northern Gulf in what we call the Puerto Penasco, Puerto Lobos corridor. And here you can see there's not a lot of lines, so there's been very little management going on there. And here we decided to focus on the species of economic interest to fishermen and help them figure out how to manage those so that they're done in a sustainable way that enhance their economic capacity as well as minimize the impact on the environment. So that project we started in 2015, and here in this corridor, and you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, basically 6 fishing communities involved, and we've used the same model: economic solutions, education, participation in training, research, and then ecosystems and fisheries management and climate change. So fishermen have been involved. We had democratically elected representatives from the 6 communities that formed part of an inter-community fisher group, and they met together with a group of researchers and a group of government agents to discuss what the problems were, first identifying problems and then trying to come up with solutions for better management of 11 priority species that they decided they wanted to work on in this corridor. So this structure we created out of nothing. These 6 communities didn't talk to each other, so we were trying to get them together and show them how they could work together and accomplish big things. And 5 years later, we've got a good group. This is a group of sport fishermen that have also joined. The fishermen have been involved in monitoring their catch, so they're collecting data on their catch. Women from the oyster cooperatives in the estuaries have also joined with this group. And we've been able to document exactly what they're fishing and where they're fishing. We've come up using some state-of-the-art models. Our research team, CEDO's research team, put it into some software and came out with these fishing zones that they could possibly use for some of the more sedentary species and reduce conflicts. And they agreed to adopt these. Fishermen also came up with areas that they would like to set up as fisheries refuges where they would not fish at all. This is a proposal that we put together and presented to the government about a year ago. And with the change in government, the new government did not participate in the process. The old government actually supported us with funding to do it, and the new government is not sure what they want to do. So we've spent a lot of effort to build this these stewards, and things change. So we're still hoping, but the management proposal that fishermen produced and that was given to the government protects key habitats, it protects key species, and 11 of their primary fisheries. It enhances recruitment and things that can help make these last for them for a long period of time. Also, we sought to give them, strengthen their ownership rights with permits. A lot of them are traditional fishermen who have no permits. So that was one of the things that they wanted out of the deal. So again, focusing on economic solutions is the way to engage people. That's where the threats are, and we need to find sustainable ways to do that. CEDO's not an expert in this, but we've dabbled in it. We've created a Natarte ecotourism corridor and tried to help some of the local people interested in developing micro businesses, tourism businesses, and kayaks. The oyster farm at Estero Marua. We built, students from the University of Arizona painted this mural and we got some funding to build the building for enhancing their restaurant so that they could stay there and continue their low impact activities. And we created the ecotourism brand Natarte, trying to incorporate other businesses and help with the marketing. The same with sustainable seafood. The market has a role in supporting these sustainable activities, and ultimately, if the market pays a higher value for fishermen that are responsible, then we can help drive the whole system so that everybody is more responsible. So here, these market solutions we here in the Tucson community are part of that market, and so we can be participants too in this process. We are stakeholders. The CEDO team is pretty dynamite, a pretty dynamic team that changes regularly, but we've got probably 30 people working for us at CEDO that are very committed, working with communities and trying to forward this work. People working here in the U.S., I mentioned Alan Berman, who's here with us tonight, who's in the Tucson office. He's back there. He's going to be talking to you at the end here. And, this work that we've been doing at CEDO has been recognized. It's what needs to happen on a global scale. We've won environmental education awards in Mexico, given to us by the President of Mexico last November. The corridor project I just mentioned won the National Award for Sustainable Fisheries for the research that we did. The first such award given by the national government, meaning that they're starting to get a vision for sustainable fisheries. We won National Conservation Award and the Field Station Award, for human diversity, for the diversity of people that we involve in field activities. So CEDO is being recognized on the global stage. Other stakeholders, we have a dynamite board, intercultural board, that comes together through a united executive committee and makes the most important decisions about governance of the organization. People from the local community in Penasco and throughout Mexico, as well as here in Tucson and in other places in the U.S., are key to keeping the organization going and moving forward. Another set of stakeholders. And as you probably are aware, at the beginning of the introductory materials, kind of announced to everyone that I am, CEDO is going through a transition this year, and I'm leaving my position as executive director of CEDO for 40 years, co-director with my husband Rick, and during most of that time, and we're passing the baton to a new executive director, Dr. Delida Barajas Acosta, who is in Puerto Penasco at this moment. So we have a dynamic team, and CEDO will continue to build stewardship for the next 40 years, but mainly try to maintain the people that have been activated doing good things for the environment. And you, there's a role for you too. You can help us set anchor to this 40-year legacy, our vision of thriving coastal communities, sustainable livelihoods, and healthy ecosystems. A couple of events, announcements that I can mention is on October 19th, we have our international cleanup at Puerto Penasco. If you're going to be down there, you want to go down to help, that would be great. And then on March 14th, we're going to have a 40th anniversary concert and celebration in Puerto Penasco at CEDO. So, and there are other ways. Like I said, you're the market, and we can drive this. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, and there's a lot of inspiration in the story of CEDO. You've accomplished an amazing amount, and now we're going to turn to questions. As those of you who have been here before, remember, if you raise your hand, I will bring you the microphone, and that way everybody hears the question that's being asked. And if you'd rather not ask the question on the microphone, you can raise your hand, tell me, and I'll ask the question for you. And so do we have any first questions out there?
There's one right there.
Oh, I'm around the corner here. There we go.
Thank you. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I used to fish in Puerto Lobos during the late 70s and early 80s, and I stopped because the government of Mexico actually leased the bottom of the ocean, and they scraped all the scallops and other sea life up in that area, and the fishing just went hot after that. I don't know whether you have any idea if they still license Japanese ships to come in and
No, the Japanese ships are not coming into the Gulf anymore, and the small-scale fishermen complain about the trawlers, the Mexican trawlers coming too close to their shore, and that's one of the conflicts that they want to resolve, is to keep the trawlers further out the shore.
The shrimp trawlers?
The shrimp trawlers, yeah. But there's the fisheries are pretty, they're the Puerto Lobos community actually has decided to, even though it's not formal, these fisheries refuges that we set up, they've decided to respect them anyway, even though the government hasn't established them. So, and the whole point in getting fishermen involved is that they have a stake in seeing that. And part of the whole idea of the corridor was to try to get all the stakeholders involved in the use of that area, give them exclusive use of that area, and build their capacity and interest in protecting it, and then move forward that way.
Here's the microphone.
I'm just wondering, what is the source of funding for all of this work?
Oh, it's varied. CEDO's very diverse in its funding sources. For this corridor project, we had money from CONAPESCA, the federal fisheries authorities. We had money from the German government through their environmental agency, a program that they call Blue Solutions. We had money from the Nature Conservancy. One of our longer-term funders is the David and Lucille Packard Foundation. They've been funding us since 1996. But we also, the field station generates money. When classes come down, we charge them. So we try to have some of our own little enterprises to help us make it through grants, from one grant to the next. Right now is a particularly difficult time. We have individual donors, membership. Now is a particularly difficult time because the government has changed in Mexico, and a lot of the funders are waiting to see how things are going to play out before they fund projects. Because as you can see, some of the projects that are really beautiful and well implemented can't move forward unless the government buys in as well.
We've got another question over here.
We also sell T-shirts.
I've had one, it's worn out. Now, you were established after the Colorado River quit flowing to the Gulf. I am presuming.
Yeah, in 1980, I think it was, the Glen Canyon Dam went in, and so that was the last real shortage or cutting off of the Colorado River.
Okay,
and that's
well,
when we opened.
Yes. What is known about the change of the northern Gulf ecosystem since the Colorado River no longer flows there?
Well, that's a topic of great debate. There are those that say that it has not impacted the Gulf's productivity at all. There's evidence it's affected the riparian community. There's some people that say the shrimp productivity is impacted, freshwater. A lot of species will migrate to freshwater as a nursery ground, but species that live, that can thrive in freshwater environments can usually go either way. They can thrive in saltier environments. So with the tides, there's constant upwelling of nutrients, so there's some evidence that some clam species have gone extinct, and so it's not clear what the impact is on the upper Gulf environment. Fishermen on the San Felipe side want to say that it's impacted their fisheries. It doesn't seem to have had an impact on vaquita at all. So it's varied. The totoaba, which is an androgynous species, the big croaker that I talked about, they used to migrate and spawn in the Colorado Delta River area. They were abundant. Actually, the three main fishing communities in the Upper Gulf were founded with fishermen seeking that fish. But in the 50s, the fish basically, by 75, it was one of the first marine fish to be declared in danger of extinction. Predominantly from overfishing, everyone thinks, but in 1990, another fish very similar to it resurged, came back and filled in the ecosystem, and it's also one that comes up to the Colorado River Delta to spawn. And the totoaba came back in 2012, causing this major problem because the narco trafficking. So it's not clear. Obviously, it was an important part of the ecosystem in one way or another, but it's not clear.
Thank you. Complicated story. Do we have other questions? Oh, right up here.
Hi. Well, first, I just want to commend you on your partnerships with the community. I think it's really, really impressive. I was wondering if you've been able to make contact with the people who are planning the cruise ship, and if so, what that relationship looks like?
I don't know if the staff has recently had contact with the cruise ship. The home port is not finished. They're selling tickets, but the port is not finished. Before they put the port in, we participated in giving our opinion on the environmental impact studies, and fishermen the other day were commenting on how it's impacted their fisheries by changing the sedimentation in the region, and it's 5,000 tourists a week. The community sees this, has seen this as a salvation for the drop in the tourism economy that occurred after the crises in the late 2000s, and they see this as the solution. As a home port, visitors will stay there a day before and a day after, and so everybody's looking at how they might capitalize on that. I don't know that they have the capacity to manage that. The damage, environmental damage, a large part of it has been done just by the construction that's there. So I don't know where it stands right now.
Thank you. We have another question back here, and I see a hand back there too.
To get to Puerto Lobos, I went through Caborca and then through the wine fields, and I noticed that there are a lot of pumps pumping out fresh water to service the grapes in that area. Does this withdrawal of water from the groundwater system hurt your projects?
I mean, not directly our project, it hurts the entire region. I mean, they're over harvesting water from a limited resource, and not sustainable for the long term. There have been a couple of projects we were involved with. The Las Conchas community was trying to put in desalinization, and they've done that successfully in the south and Bajas with the developments that are going in down there. But nobody has successfully done that at Puerto Penasco. But it needs to be addressed, nor has anybody really focused on water conservation in the big hotels, like sustainable, not washing your sheets every day, that kind of stuff, basic green practices. But that's something I think CEDO will probably be getting into.
Thank you.
I might add something. We had a little weather station.
Let me bring you the microphone. Everybody can hear.
CEDO maintained a weather station for many years, and the average rainfall in Puerto Penasco was around 3 inches a year. So whatever water's being drawn from whatever aquifer in that region, it's not being replenished. So long term, this is definitely a problem.
Thank you. See another question here.
So as a teacher as well, I'm just curious, it's always nice to give students a non-apocalyptic, distant future view. And I'm curious what you think some of the key components of that future could be.
That everything they do is important, and they need to be responsible in their use of resources so that they're not needlessly impacting the natural environment and the environment that we depend upon. I mean, I don't see that as doom and gloom. I think that's a kind of a natural just respecting the environment. So teach people to admire the environment and to see when something is not good, and to see what they can do to keep that from happening.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alan, and I currently work with CEDO. And I guess my question is more for Shipper than Peggy, but also just addressing everyone here. And I say it at the risk of offending anyone, but my question is, where are the youth? So Peggy and I were recently at a climate change event, and we saw a lot of older people as well. And I look around this room and I see the elders of our society. I see a lot of wisdom. I see a lot of people who have dedicated their lives to conservation and to other projects. And some of the things that I've really appreciated lately are people coming up to me and saying, my granddaughter, my son is really interested in the environment. How can they get involved? How can they volunteer? And also your question as a teacher, what are the messages that we can give the kids? And so, my question to Shipper, I guess, is why don't we see more, University of Arizona students? Here we are in a university town, a college town. Why aren't the youth in our country interested in science? And I know from a sort of a binational perspective, it's a little bit different in Mexico. Maybe Peggy can touch on this, but I think attitudes all over the world towards science and conservation are a little bit different. So anyway, just in closing, I just think that everyone here has a role to play in inspiring the next generation. And we see at CEDO, we see grandparents taking their grandkids out kayaking or exploring the Pinacate or the estuary and sharing that knowledge and wisdom with them. And I think that's really the most important thing that we can do, and that's a role that Rick and Peggy have played for me and many other people, are sharing their knowledge, sharing their wisdom with the next generation. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. We have another question right here, and I will pick up with my own comments on Alan's comments, but first we're going to have this other question. Any other questions we have coming?
Yeah, with the individual that just spoke about the youth, how often do you go out, or the people that work within your group go out to the public schools and speak?
Regularly. I mean, we are invited to give talks all the time. We have programs when we have funding. We had a program for 5 years where we invited all the 5th graders to come out to CEDO. We took them to the local wetland. We have a wet feet ocean camp in the summer where we invite, it's a bilingual camp, so we invite 9 to 12-year-olds to come together with kids from here and Mexico to explore different environments. And this environmental contest, we go out to all the schools and invite everybody in the schools in 9 communities to participate. Not all of them participate. We might have 500 participants a year, but we're constantly doing it. It's a big order. We've tried training teachers, and that works at some level for teachers to become knowledgeable. But it's really a lot more impactful if the passion that those of us that have studied marine biology bring to the table with this youth. But education is a core component of what we do at CEDO, and funding to have the impact, the long-term impact in the schools is a limited resource.
We go to the schools, but the schools come to CEDO.
Yeah, the schools also come to CEDO. They make appointments. They can make appointments to come out to CEDO for a talk or whatever as well.
Thank you. I think we have a comment on Alan's comment about engaging youth with environmental conservation.
So I work with teachers in Southern Arizona and around the country. And in case you're unaware, Arizona is hyper underfunding education. So this is a critical issue, and with elections coming up, I hope that if you live in a district where they're having a bond override, which is 25% of our districts, and that's not mismanagement of funds at an administrative level, that's a government failure to fund education in this state. So really talented teachers are leaving because they can't afford to be teachers anymore, and they love what they do, but they can't afford to do it. So support education. That is a huge answer.
We have another question here. Thank you.
I know that, was it Ricketts and Steinbeck didn't get that far north.
Yeah.
Did they?
Actually, I don't know exactly how far.
I don't think
north.
they got that.
They got that.
And I was wondering if there is a similar institute in the area they worked in and how useful their data is.
Could you provide context for that question? Because I didn't understand.
Yeah, Steinbeck and Ricketts. John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts, who is a biologist, paired up and they did a cruise in the Gulf of California in the Sea of Cortez, and they wrote a well-known book called The Log from the Sea of Cortez. I forget what year that was. Huh? In the 30s. And it was, it was a pristine environment at that time, and it's an amazing book. I highly recommend that everyone read it. And they didn't quite get as far as we are. And the question is, did they have an institute? They were from Monterey Bay, California.
Is there a similar institute in the area they were on, and how useful is the data?
Oh, there are a lot of environmental organizations. CEDO was one of the first, actually, probably the oldest working in the Gulf of California. We've been around for 40 years. Pro Natura has been around almost 40 years. A lot of these organizations work in different places. None of them are as quite as focused on building community in the community where they're located. They may go to another fishing community and work on things there. So everybody has different strategies, but there's a good group of environmental organizations working in the Gulf.
But there were none then.
Yeah, back in 1940 there were none.
We have another comment on that question.
I just wanted to add on the point of is the data useful or not. I think it's important to remember that often we don't know how useful scientific data will be. They're sort of like misshaped bricks in a wall, and sometimes you'll find the right brick with the right shape, and it might be extremely useful. And another interesting fact is that sort of the go-to textbook for scientists studying the intertidal zone today was written by Rick Brusca, who is the ex-director of the Desert Museum, and he's a local Tucsonian. One of the pioneers of scuba diving, the scuba diving industry in general, Paul Dayton, he's the world's sort of most famous kelp forest ecologist, was from Tucson, Arizona as well. So yeah, all science, even Rick's brother, Ed, he was sort of the first guy to really delve deep into studying the sun star, which is one of CEDO's symbols, the Heliaster Cubanigi. And so, anyone looking to, they realize that it's a Keystone Predator. It engineers the whole intertidal zone, and anyone studying that is going to revert to his research, which at the time, he might not have known how important that was. So.
Excellent comments, thank you. I think we had another question here.
Your program is so impressive, and I wonder, as you developed it, did you base it on other programs, or did you just kind of create it yourselves?
Just kind of created ourselves. Just basically with the premise that that sharing information, gathering information, curious ourselves, and hosting researchers, and putting together information and sharing it with the local community, and as you see things that need to be done, getting people involved in doing it. I mean, it's a pretty simple formula, and we've been at it for a long time and very persistent at what we do, and pretty expansive and wanting to engage a lot of people. So it kind of grew naturally.
Thank you. Do we have other? I'm not seeing any other hands go up at the moment, so I'm going to make a few comments of my own. One thing I'm happy to report is that we have field trips coming to Flandreau every day, often 2 or 3 school groups a day. And so those kids are getting engaged with science, and they often leave more curious about both the natural world or oceans or space. A lot of them see our sharks exhibit, which is a way to engage them and get them into ocean science. So I find hope there. I see a lot of kids getting excited by science. We also have a large student staff, University of Arizona students at Flandreau, and they are smart and engaged young people who I hope will go on to do great things, whether that's in science or science communications. But I see those kids, because they're kind of kids to me, actively talking about and engaging in both science when they're science majors, but also in communicating the value of science. So all of those things are, I think, hopeful. Neil McSweeney, who's our facilities manager, who helps me run the Science Cafe, also mentioned Sean Pipes, who runs an organization here in Tucson that engages a lot of kids called the Finn Foundation, engages a lot of kids with marine science. And at Flandreau, we have a program that I think is not a CEDO program, but has deep ties to CEDO, called Marine Discovery, where kids come and do hands-on activities that teach them about marine biology. And Sean Pipes and his foundation helped establish that and get it going. So there's a lot of people that are working to engage youth in our community, and certainly there's always more that can be done, and sometimes it feels as though the tides that we are working against are more powerful, but I think that the CEDO story is particularly inspirational about how to engage people to care about the environment where they live and see the value in that healthy environment. So those are the comments I wanted to add. Are there other questions that we have out there? Yeah, right here.
And maybe you said this before, but if we come down to Puerto Penasco, do you need an appointment to come to CEDO? Is it just open to the public? What?
I'm still connected. We have regular tours that give an introduction to the natural history of the area on Tuesdays at 2 in English and 4 in Spanish, and on Saturdays at 4 in English, 2 in Spanish. If you want to go out to the tide pools or a field trip, we advertise particular dates for those tours, and we charge for that. And if you have your own group, you can make a date to go on a tide pool or to have a special tour of the facility as well.
Visitor center and gift shop.
I would.
Yeah, the visitor center and the gift shop are open all the time, 9 to 5.
And if you just walk right in the door, there's exhibits there about what CEDO's working on and stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we're working on trying to improve those exhibits, but.
I have more information here.
Yeah, there's Alan. Alan's got some information. He's got some T-shirts. He's got membership forms. He'll get you participating.
Well, thank you all for being here this evening. I think a big round of applause for Peggy Turk-Boyer and CEDO.
And celebrate with us. This is our 40th anniversary. There are not many organizations that are around 40 years later in this business. So 40 years. We just started. We launched, we did a kind of a breaking of the ribbon in Penasco last weekend, and we'll be doing a number of different activities to celebrate. 14th of March is a big party down there. But celebrate with us here.
Thank you. And I hope that we'll see you all next month for the next installment of our Ocean Science Cafe series. Thanks for being here and have a great month. And talk to Alan in the back.
You haven't stopped. You're supposed to be getting out to 70 or 80 years, right? That's a good sign.